Um, maybe rather than going kind of one by one, because I know we want to keep this to about 25 minutes, and so that you can eat your actual lunch after we're done learning. Um, and um, so maybe in the chat, you could just, if you would like, put your name, maybe what school you go to. I guess you don't need your name, it's already there, but maybe what school you go to, and why you decided to come to our lunch and learn today. And while you are all doing that, I am going to share my screen. So let's see, 1 second. Because I am recording, I cannot minimize my screen, which makes things more challenging, but here we are. All right. So throw this into present mode. And go back to the beginning. All right, so I welcomed you all. Here we are. We're going to chat a little bit about interview basics. We'll talk both about in-person interviews and also virtual interviews. And then Chelsea will chat a little bit about Semester in the City, which is the organization that we both work for and that Chelsea is an alum of. So our goals today is so that you know why interviews exist. You may not know that already, but we will chat a little bit about it. Have 3 new tips to implement in an interview, either in person or virtually, and that you will have learned about Semester in the City. Just the norms. It's awesome if your name is showing. If you'd like to display your pronouns as well, that would be great. That is up to you. You can utilize the chat to answer any discussion questions that we talk about. And if we're going to chat in person, make sure that you are not muted, because our favorite phrase is, I can't hear you, you're muted, for the past year. So in the chat, if you could just maybe, in a sentence or 2, tell us what you think an interview is for. That'll be a good place to get us started. Hoping everybody is typing. Yes, Daniela, that's totally on point. So this is one of the things that we'll talk a little bit about more, but I think what you're getting at here is that an interview goes 2 ways. So not only is the interviewer chatting with you to make sure that you meet job qualifications, and that your working style and personality fit with the company, but also you want to remember that you are talking to them to see if you think their company meets your working style and personality. So there's sort of there's a 2-way street there. Right, Alexander, the word discussion, I think, gets at that. The idea that it's not just sort of like a series of questions that somebody is throwing at you, but that you also have the opportunity to learn something in an interview. Cool. So what are the benefits of an interview? So for the company, we talked a little bit about this. You're getting to hear a story about your candidate, and getting a chance to, I think, really hear more than what a resume or a cover letter can tell you. You're getting a chance to really see like what your interviewee highlights in terms of qualities, experience, and interests. And you're also getting a chance to gauge a candidate's interest in and knowledge of the company or the college or grad school or whatever opportunity you're applying for. That's going to be something that a company is able to do, is they're able to know, like, did you read the job description? Did you look at information on the website? Did you take notes? Like, they're definitely looking for all of those things. And like I said, we'll chat a little bit more about that in a second. So they're also looking to see, are you a right fit for this position, for the team? They're obviously getting an opportunity to ask questions, or sorry, you are getting a chance to determine if you're the right fit. You have the opportunity to ask questions. And it also really gives you the chance to kind of come to life as somebody off paper, like off the resume and off your cover letter, and really gives you the opportunity to think about and, in a concise way, present why you think you're the best fit for the role. So some tips for a successful interview. Preparation is key. And I say this all the time to students I work with who are applying to colleges, because I also do some of that on the side. You shouldn't walk into an interview cold. In the same way that you theoretically shouldn't have walked into, for example, your SAT is totally cold, right? Like without doing any sort of preparation. The same is true for an interview. And so here are some things that I think are worth thinking about before you walk into that interview. Think about questions that they might ask you and how you might answer them. And we'll talk a little bit about some common questions in a second. You definitely want to do research on the position and the company. And I think in particular there, thinking about what is their mission and what are their goals, so that you can sort of weave some of that same language into your answers. For example, if I look at the CFSI, if I look at our website, the Semester in the City website, and I see that one of our goals is inclusion, and we want to have an inclusive work environment. How can you as a candidate talk about what you've done in the past to make your own work environment more inclusive? Think about what's your story. So for example, on my resume, I have a gap because I was staying home to take care of my now 7-year-old. So I have a 2.5-year gap on my resume in which I wasn't doing full-time work. How am I going to talk about that as part of my story, right? Thinking about what does your resume look like, and how are you turning it into kind of a narrative of your work life? Something really important that I think we don't all think about, because not all of us have these needs, but do you have any accessibility concerns? So for example, if you're going to be doing a Zoom interview, do you need something to be closed captioned? Do you need an ASL interpreter? If you're going to do it in person, do you know what is the accessible way into the building, if that's something that you need specifically? Absolutely feel free to ask those questions up front, because you want to make sure that you're going to work for an organization where if you need or have accessibility concerns, they're going to be able to provide those things for you that you need in order to succeed. You want to have a list of questions that you are going to ask them, and we'll talk more about those in a second. You want to have extra printed copies of your materials, your resume. If you're giving a presentation, if you had to do any other sort of work for them, bring a printed copy. Very early on in my job searching career, I was about 21. I walked into an interview without a printed copy of my resume because I thought nobody does that anymore. And the rabbi who I was interviewing with was incredibly upset that I did not have a printed copy. So bring one with you just in case. And then obviously confirm that your contact information is correct in case there are any changes or you need to make any modifications to your interview time or date. So here are some questions that I think you should think about when you are preparing for your interview. The first is an incredibly open-ended question. Tell me about yourself. And that's really when you want to dig into that story that you crafted when you were thinking about your resume. What sort of work have you done? What kind of work would you like to do in the future? And how does all of that make you a good candidate for the company? But also in that particular question, you can think about presenting yourself as a whole human. So not just the work that you've done, but also the things that you might like to do outside of your work life as well. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? This is a question that gets asked a lot. I think it's good to have maybe 3 examples of strengths that you can bring to the table, 1 example of a weakness, and have thought about how you can loop your weakness back around into something that you're working to change. So, for example, my weakness is time management. I might say that and then say, and I've been working on it in the following ways so that they can see that you're thinking with a growth mindset. You want to talk about or be ready to talk about why you'd like to work in this particular place, why they should hire you. That's a moment where you shouldn't be afraid to be, you don't want to brag, but you do want to be confident. I think some of us are taught growing up that we're not supposed to talk about the things about us that are strengths, right? Like we're not supposed to present ourselves as confident because we're told that that's too braggy. But like this is the moment where you really want to talk about like what is best, what makes you best for this job? What about your background makes you the best candidate? Describing a situation where you were challenged, that's something that definitely comes up quite a bit. A time when you experienced a failure, which I think is in the same vein. And what's an accomplishment that you're most proud of? That's something that they're likely to ask as well. In all of these questions, you want to think about the STAR method. So this, I think, is the hottest tip of the day, is how to think about your answers to these questions. And I think almost every single one of the questions you're asked can be put into this sort of like 4-step answer. So the first thing you want to do is describe the situation that you are in. Then you want to talk about what you were responsible for. You want to talk about how you accomplished that task. And then you want to talk about what the result was. Oops. So for example, let's say you were working in a restaurant and you're describing this particular moment in response to the question, describe a situation when you were challenged. So you're setting the situation by saying, it was really busy. I was covering 10 tables. There were a ton of guests. We were understaffed. You have to lay out what your task was. So you had to efficiently figure out how to manage all of those people at the same time with very little help. You had 2 allergies, you had 40 people, and you had to provide excellent customer service with a smile the entire time. And then you're going to talk about how did you do that? You introduced yourself, you smiled, you took careful notes, you made sure the kitchen staff were aware of those allergies. And the result of those actions are everybody got 40 customers, or everybody got meals. Nobody got peanuts when they weren't supposed to. So really like breaking it down into those 4 steps, I think allows you to give a concise answer without sort of trailing off, without talking for too long, and the other end of that without not talking enough. You always want to make sure that you're backing up the things that you're saying with examples, and this method lets you do that in a very easy way. So we won't use the chat for this unless folks want to. But if you just want to shout out, if any of you have questions that you found particularly difficult during an interview, would you like to mention what they were? Chelsea, have you had any questions that you found particularly difficult during interviews? Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, off the top of my head, none that I can think of, but I've done a lot of mock interviews with folks. And I will say that the tell me about yourself question, I've gotten several folks who just like cry during the mock interview because they haven't thought about that. So I think when you're practicing these, like you have a lot of agency over what you're doing in your interview. These are your stories, it's your experiences, and so own that experience. And I hope that you all like, as you're thinking about the STAR method, you can like walk through your resume and practice some of those answers so that no matter what question they ask you, you have an answer already in your back pocket. So I hope, what is a failure you have experienced? I think Alex.
Yeah.
In the chat.
That's a hard one because you're trying to think about like what's something that's significant enough to talk about, but isn't so horrific that it's going to prevent you from getting the job, right? Like you need to find a middle ground there. Um, and it's definitely challenging to do. And so it's a good one to think about beforehand because almost every interview that I have been in my work life, like me as the candidate, that question has come up. And so uh, I might, for example, there was a time like early on in my work life, I was working in college admissions. I had put together an entire schedule for myself for fall travel season, which is when we would take off on a plane, be gone for 2 months, and go to high schools every day. We were usually visiting 4 high schools a day. I had a whole schedule lined up for myself. I had been in touch with guidance counselors. I had made appointments. Um, and I had not backed that schedule up anywhere. And my laptop got stolen. So then I had to work through and figure out what had my schedule been, call people again, try to remember things. Um, so definitely something that was my fault, right? Like I should have backed it up somewhere. Google Docs hadn't been invented yet, so there was no cloud, right? There was like no place where it was automatically saved. But I'm also able to say, and I learned from that XYZ. At that point, it meant that I was like saving things on a CD, which I could keep separate from my laptop. Now it means I do every single piece of my work in Google Drive and also back it up somewhere else so that I always have access to it. So you want to find like that sweet middle spot where you can also talk about, and as a result of this, I learned XYZ, because that's what they're really looking for. They're not looking for how did you fail. They're looking for, and what did you do to make it better? Cool. All right. So some in-person interview tips quickly, because I realize we are running out of time for Chelsea to talk. These are pretty obvious, right? Interview appropriate attire. That can vary from place to place. So take a look at their website and see what the people there are wearing, and then maybe knock it up 1 or 2 notches. I don't think you can ever go wrong with a suit, but like you don't always have to wear one. Take a look at the website. Make eye contact, ask thoughtful questions, which you've thought about beforehand, be confident and be specific, and then always send a thank you note that says, thank you so much. I learned this particular thing about the company that makes me even more interested, excited to hear back from you. Some questions to ask in the interview. And like I said, you want to have these written down so you don't forget them when you walk in. Why is the position open? Was the person promoted? So that you know, like, is there room for growth in the company? What opportunities are there for professional development? What's the company culture like? Things that are going to allow you to see, to figure out if you can see yourself in the position that's open. Fluffy, vague language. You want to really think about specifics. So avoid being vague. You don't want to, even if you had the crappiest supervisor in your past job, don't say that. You want not to speak poorly of people you've worked with. If you have a favorite perfume that's really strong, maybe don't wear it to your interview. Don't chew gum while you're actually talking to them. And this thing I added, even if your heels are your favorite thing in the world, if you can't walk in them and they're uncomfortable, don't wear them. Because you don't want to spend most of your time thinking about tripping when they're giving you a tour of their office. Spoken from personal experience. A lot of the virtual interview tips are the same, but making sure you have a strong internet connection, your device is charged. This says wearing interview appropriate attire from head to toe. I'm going to tell you I'm wearing sweatpants right now. So if you can be sure that like you don't have to stand up, just make sure that from here up, you are looking like you are at a regular in-person interview. Looking into the camera, logging on early, just making sure that you're really prepared for anything that could maybe go wrong with your connection. Try not to look at yourself, although I know that that's really hard. I often take the box of the person that I'm talking to and put it right under my camera so that I can make sure that I'm like looking at them. And don't have other tabs open because then it's really tempting to go check your email in the middle. Some phone interviews, although fewer people are doing this, just like make sure your phone is on, you're confirming the number that you have is correct. Like I said, always send a thank you note. and check back in if you don't hear after the deadline that they've given you. And to transition into Chelsea, 35%, I can't see exactly what this says because of the box of people that I'm talking to, but students who have an internship or co-op experience are significantly more likely to get a job offer than their peers without that or internship experience. And with that note, Chelsea's going to talk to you about Semester in the City.
Yeah, thanks, Devin. So Semester in the City is an opportunity in Boston where we match you with internships in the social impact sector. So they could be a nonprofit, it could be a socially minded organization. So you're in your internships for about 30 hours a week, and then you have 2 courses that relate to the internships in the sense of your Wednesday courses, it's thinking about the social sector as a whole and maybe how your organization fits into that and the work that you're doing. And then Friday courses are more about your development as an individual in the social sector. So how can you take your learnings from class and implement that into your internship? All of our students live in the Boston area for the program duration. We have CAs, some community advisors, who live in our apartments that students are welcome to stay in while they're here in the program. So you're living with students in the program. They do lots of fun activities. Even during COVID, we've done a mix of like virtual and hybrid events, safely, socially distanced, and they love getting feedback from students in the program about things to do in Boston that you all might be interested in. And some of our benefits include different transportation passes, a stipend, and then some meals are provided as well. And it's a total of 400 hours for the internship program that you'd be doing. And it's a social impact organization in Boston. And all of them are accessible from our housing if they are a hybrid model in the future, hybrid or in person. But they could be a nonprofit, government agency, or a socially minded business. So we have some students who are doing research like along the Charles River, and it's more science-based, and some who are doing like government work downtown in Boston. I personally was at 826 Boston, which is in a school, so I worked with K-8 students. But we try our best to align these internships with your passions, career goals. If you have any major requirements, it's helpful for us to know that in advance so that we can help meet your goals. And all of our students have one-on-one sessions with their mentors. Ideally, it's once a week, but that's just a general check-in. Devin, I feel the struggle. You press one button and it goes like 10 ahead. And those mentor coaches, what's really special and what piqued my interest in this program when I was a student is that all of the mentors apply to be mentors. So you're not getting coffee, you're not doing like these side projects, you're doing a project, which we call a special project, that they want. It's helpful for the organization, and they're truly invested in your professional development and growth. A lot of our students, once they graduate from the program, are still involved with the organizations that they interned with. And a lot of them have spoken to the transferable skills. Maybe they wanted to see, they were curious about the social sector, decided maybe it's not the best for them, but they still learned a lot from the internships and took those transferable skills and put them elsewhere. So for instance, like a student who's in marketing could be useful in the social sector. They decided to go in more of the private sector, but all of the skills that they learned from their internship, they could use elsewhere. Semester in the City graduates get jobs. So like that earlier statistic that Devin shared, if you have an internship, you're more likely to have a full-time offer post-graduation. And so these are some statistics. 81% of our graduates receive full-time employment offers within the first 6 months of graduating from their bachelor's degree program, not necessarily Semester in the City, because we have students from all grade levels in there. More students are likely to go to graduate school, things along those lines. And we have UNH is in there, but the national average as well. So UNH is one of our larger partners, but you can see 81% compared to the 60% national average.
And here's some exciting information for you about how you can reach us after this presentation. Chelsea, do you have the interest form up? Chelsea's going to put a form in the chat that will ask for your information so that we can be in touch with you after this. We're not going to spam you. You will get the occasional email and the occasional text. Mostly it gives us your information so we can just follow up and see if you have any questions after this conversation. And with that, also, if you want to follow us on a variety of social medias, you can do that. We have some exciting Instagram content. I have a few minutes to answer questions, if anybody has any. And you can feel free to just shout, ask in the chat. It's up to you.
These could be like internship specific questions, like semester in the city or interviewing. We're open to either or both.
Hi, my name is Anna.
Hi.
I am majoring in psychology in the moment, and I am a freshman. I just started college because I took a gap semester, and since I do not have any exactly courses in my resume, but I do have my high school resume and now clubs. Is that going to be a downfall for the internship and summer internship interviews, or not really?
No, not necessarily if you can think about your story, right? So I think what you're going to want to think about is how did your courses in high school and the experiences you've had so far in college prepare you for the work that you might be doing? So really looking at like, what have you learned in those classes that's going to help you when you get into a more hands-on experience? Like what sort of theoretical or like educational background have you gotten that's going to prepare you for those? So just taking some time to think that through, looking at the job description and thinking about what might stand out as qualifying you, even though if you don't have the hands-on experience.
You'd be surprised too with transferable skills, like if you had a project in one of those classes that you can talk about that relates to some of those goals in the job description. So like I worked on a project that was research based and I did X, Y, and Z, like that's project management. It's just called something a little different. And so totally valid to like talk about that experience and just show how it relates. You can also highlight the job description and your resume. So you know like which specific talking points could be helpful there.
Of course. I mean, I did have some experience in high school, so that is definitely going to be very helpful. Thank you.
And I see Katie in the chat. How should I ask for an interviewer's information, email to send a thank you note in a virtual interview? Just ask at the end, like, hey, could I get your email address so that I can follow up with you? You can usually also find it on a website, like on the company's website, but it's okay just to flat out say, could I please get your interview or your email so that I can follow up? That's fine.
And if you went through a recruiter, you can ask them too.
Yep.
That's helpful.
Absolutely. So it's 12:30. I unfortunately have to be in a virtual career fair for another 2 hours. So I am going to jet to that. Thank you all for coming today. We really appreciate it. If you have further questions, you can absolutely feel free to email me. I'm sure that Chelsea would say the same. Filling out that interest form, like I said, is a really great way to get in touch with us as well. And since this was recorded, I believe it's going to be posted on our Facebook page. So if you found it helpful and you want to be able to take a look back at it, it should be there. All right. Thanks everybody for listening, and good luck with your interviews.
Thanks. Have a great day.